Hey everybody, I am back here with my good buddy Paul Barron, and we are bringing you a very special guest here. Someone who we've been aware of and fond of for many, many years. He's worked with just a list of a mile long of people. And Paul and I actually, and Mark share some of the same artists that we've worked with, but he's worked with Mel Torme, the Hollywood Pops Orchestra, Frank Sinatra Jr. He's had one of the toughest gigs ever, Ringling Brothers. Just to name a few. He's had performances and appearances, master classes in places as far away as in China, Japan, and of course across the United States. He is the founder of Trumpet Player Online, which started back in 1992. So he was one of the first guys with a trumpeting group, which I think is really, really cool. He studied with some great teachers, Bill Adam, Claude Gordon, Don Jacoby, and a number of others. And as well, he has some great books that I actually own and work out of, Maximizing Practice, Volumes 1 and Volumes 2, and Zen and the Art of Trumpet Playing. So welcome, Mark Van Cleave. Great to have you here.
Good to be here. Enjoy. Thanks for asking me to be here.
All right. Hey, Mark, I have a question for you. I'm going to throw out the first one.
Okay.
I've been aware of you for, probably since about 1992. And there was a term, and I hope I'm getting this correct, resonant intonation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you explain what that is? Because I'm really fascinated by that, and I totally agree with you, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other people that would like to know about that.
It probably becomes more complicated than I ever intended it to be when you try to explain it. Let me just take a side note real quick. Resonant intonation, that was my terminology that I came up with for it. I studied with a guy in college, David Baker, who's a well-known jazz educator. And he told me one time, he says, if you come up, because he was one of the guys who kind of developed jazz pedagogy. He's the first guy that made it into a college degree and came up with a whole program for it. And he says, if you come up with a terminology, then you'll own it. So when I'm teaching, I try to come up with terms that kind of describe what I'm talking about, so it's easy to kind of internalize and maybe remember. But that's where that terminology came from. I tried to come up with something that described this. But resonant intonation is my way of just trying to describe playing directly in the center of the slot. And again, that's a little bit unusual to just say that and leave it. Okay, everybody knows what that is now. The slots are, the harmonics as you're going through the different intervals when you're like open and doing flexibility stuff. Each note has kind of a slot that it wants to kind of lock into. And that's governed by the resonance inside the horn, which says that this pitch will be a C in the staff. But the horn wants to resonate because of the harmonic overtone series and stuff. It's all kind of math stuff we really can't argue with, which I think is good for trumpet players, because trumpet players always going to try and figure out a way that, well, that can't be right. Well, this is just math. It's all about harmonics.
Well, I've always heard that math is not an exact science.
Well, I have heard that 2 + 2 can equal 5 if you know how to do the math a certain way. So I don't know. Well, I'm not that smart. So I just look at it like, here's the slot. And that's pretty much what we're talking in that slot is pitch. So you can take a note, hit the note, and you can kind of move it around a little bit before it snaps into the next overtone and out of this slot. Resonant intonation is when you play exactly in the center of that slot, and you're getting the most help from the resonance of the trumpet that you can. Like there are, if you look up, I think the Tacoma Bridge back in the 40s or something. It got hit by some wind and the cables started resonating, and it knocked the whole bridge down. That's pretty powerful. I'm a believer that you can use that same power and in trumpet playing or anything else that's acoustically based, if you use that resonance to your benefit. It's like another thing from Resonant Intonation, playing like hyper in tune with where the horn is tuned. For instance, like here's where you have the tune, like you could tune the trumpet so this slot is going to go like this, or like this, depending on where the tuning slide is. Your job isn't to like play A440, let's say. If you're a group that you're playing with is playing A435 because you're outside and the weather's changing, the pitch for everybody, then you need to tune your horn to 435 so that when you're playing at 435 with the band, you're getting the maximum resonance. Like, for instance, if you have the horn tuned at A440, you could play at A35 down here, but you're going to be down here just barely hanging on. You're not going to get all this resonance in here. You're going to be playing at the bottom of the slot, not getting a lot of help from the resonance. But it's like another term that I use, again, try to bring this into something people already realize. It's what I call the shower effect. And it's when you're in the shower and if you're singing, you'll notice that one or two notes that you hit all of a sudden just pop out. They're just so much louder than it's easier to produce those notes. They're twice as loud. They sound better. They have better tone. Everything is enhanced. And that's the resonant frequency of your shower stall. And just about anything on this planet has a resonant frequency. And as a musician, as a trumpet player playing an acoustical instrument, one of our biggest jobs, in my opinion, is to try and play in that sweet spot on the trumpet as closely as possible so that you get as much help acoustically and with the resonance and all that power that's generated through resonance to do a lot of the heavy lifting for playing the trumpet.
Right. Paul and I discussed this as, having that horn work for you and not against you in many cases.
Of
and
course.
I think you bring up a great point in talking about the differences in pitch, because one of the things that people get into here, of course, talking about mouthpieces and all that stuff, but when you play mouthpieces of different sizes, different depths, your tuning slide is going to be in a completely different, at least mine is. It's in a completely different spot.
Certainly can be. Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I was on the road conducting ice shows and circuses, when we would hit a large city, we'd carry 5 or 6 people on the road at all times, and we're tiny 20,000 seat or 20,000 population towns. We would do it with the 5 or 6 people. But if we hit New York or Pittsburgh or something like that, we'd pick up, and then usually because they would have a union contract with the building, we'd pick up a whole big band of local players. Let's just say a friend of mine once described the circus as, he says, I would rather light my hair on fire and put it out with an ice pick than play a circus. And that may be the best description I've ever heard. But it really, we were doing 3-hour shows 5 or 6 days a week. And it's a brutal thing, and you can't prepare for it. I don't, at least after doing and conducting shows like that for 15 years on the road, I still don't know how you would ever prepare for it. If there is a way, I don't know it. But one thing that I had to do because it was so brutal, when I would pick up a big band, I couldn't play as much because I was going to have to conduct more. And we would have your standard 1-hour rehearsal for a 3-hour show, which means you don't cover much in the rehearsal. But one thing I would do, because I want to know how much am I going to have to play, so I would listen to the trumpet players warming up. And I could tell this guy seems like he's like a local guy, probably plays like second or third or something in the local symphony. Okay, this guy over here, he sounds kind of like he's probably a jazz player. This guy's maybe a lead player or what have you. You can kind of tell what kind of player they are. But another thing I would do, I'd look at their equipment. If they had a really shiny mouthpiece or horn that was like obviously just recently purchased, I used to get suspect because I thought, well, they're still looking for equipment. They're trying to find the magic mouthpiece or what. This could be bad at 9 hours on a Saturday, you know. So, and the other thing I would look for, which was probably the most important, was where did they put their tuning slide? I used to work at the Bach factory. I know something about designing horns and stuff. Most trumpets aren't designed to have the tuning slide out a whole inch. They're not designed to play A440 there or pushed all the way in. And it's not uncommon that you can see players that always have their tuning slide strangely too far out or too far in. Problem is, you're taking that sweet spot and you're moving it around. And you might have your chops might be, worn out, so you start overdoing things. And the thing is, if you move that sweet spot and the band is playing at A440, but you've got yours tuned way down here, the only way you're going to hit A440 is if you completely contort and muscle your chops, and your endurance is going to be very questionable. And the thing is, I got really, really good after many years of doing this. I could listen to them warm up and just look at their setup, and I could tell who was going to be there on the third show on Saturday with me, or are they all going to be, trying just to make a sound. And after I started seeing these things so often, I started trying to understand them a little bit more. And that's when I started getting into like the, as I call it, the resonant intonation. You have to tune the horn to where the group is, and then you have to play in tune to the horn. And a lot of people don't know how to tune their horns properly, and then they end up fighting it with their chops the whole night, and they wonder why they have bad endurance, or maybe they don't have the range that they'd like to have. And it's mainly because when they're playing a high C, their chops are in a position of a high G because they've got the thing tuned so poorly. So when they're, imagine if you could play, if that same player could actually play at high C with a high C setting, the efficiency level would just go through the roof, and then the high G would be there, and let's say, the high G or the double C was where your high G used to be. I've had so many students where they'll come in, they're good players, they have good chops, but I've had guys come and they can't seem to have consistency in the upper register, and they say, man, I just haven't been able to get it happening in the last couple months. And I'd check out their tuning slide and I can see what's going on right away. So the first thing we do is start to make sure the horn is tuned properly. Like for instance, if you're out on the road playing 9 hours a day, good chance your chops are not going to be the most, aren't going to be the best indicator of what's going on because they're beat up. So you're going to put them into the equation? No, you don't. No, you got to figure out how to tune your horn separately. Like for instance, like Bill Adam used to say, the notes are in the horn, and he would go, and you can hear the notes. You can hear them moving around. Now, the first time you do that, you're not going to be really good at hearing pitch when you pop the mouthpiece. But after a while, you can get pretty good at it. And I'll tell you, I would rarely tune the horn by playing it. I would on the road. I'd pop it and I'd make sure I got it as the A440 as close as I could get. So I know the horn, without my chops, good or bad that day, is pretty close to A440. And then I would try and play it at A440. I'd just try and play in tune with the group. And by doing that, it just really takes your endurance, just the ease of production, it jumps huge. I could probably go on. This is one of my big soapbox topics is getting to use resonance to help you, because I'll just say, I'll tell one quick story, and like I can tell a quick story. But my concept has always been, put the sound into the room. And again, this is a concept, and I always wanted the room then to resonate my sound. Like I want to put it out there in such a way that the actual room will take my sound, and the residents will, take care. It'll blossom basically into the room. And so the concept is put it out there so that every air molecule in the room is resonating your sound. I don't know if that's really possible. But that's sort of the concept. And I'm over in Monte Carlo years ago, and I did this jazz festival over there, and they had a house band, and I was playing lead in the house band. And we were going to play, the opening night was going to be in Princess Grace Auditorium. It's like a 500-seat, gold-plated with cherubs in the ceiling. It was obnoxious, but all the main artists that were there were going to play one tune on the opening night of the festival. And I'm from Indiana, trumpet player. So one of the guests that was at the festival that I'd never met before was Freddie Hubbard, one of my heroes. So I'm looking forward to this, but I said, I can't go over there and do this without trying to get to know him a little bit. I just got to meet this guy at some point. So we're backstage before the rehearsal for this opening night thing. And we're backstage, and I'm on one side of the backstage, and he's maybe 150 feet away. On the other side, there's probably 100 people back there. And he starts kind of warming up a little bit, playing some of being Freddie. And I was playing with the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra at the time, where we were doing a lot of Ellington stuff, which meant I had to do Cat Anderson stuff. So I had sort of some altissimo stuff going pretty good at that time, which was going to get me in trouble at that point. So I'm sitting there, and Freddie plays some lick. I hear him. So I shift into this kind of softer altissimo thing and just quietly played it back to him throughout this crowd up an octave. And he kind of looks, he didn't know who did it. 10 minutes later, he played something else, and I played it back up an octave. And this time he saw me, and he's like, hey, okay, it's, game on. So we go out there, and he had some rock chart that was not a very good chart, really. But at the end, all 5 trumpets were to play a unison high C, which is just a trap for bad intonation. So, it's a kind of a screamy kind of rock chart. So I decided, well, I should probably try and hit a double C on this because it needs something, and I don't want to, have that kind of intonation potential problem there. So on the rehearsal, I crank out a double high C, and it was a pretty good one. And after we cut the band off, he looks back at me and he said, okay. So the night of the gig, we get to that chart. He has a mic. I don't have a mic, but I knew that some sort of we're in game mode now. It's me and Freddie. So I decided I gotta hit a lunker here. I gotta get a big one. So I got a pretty big one, and I held it as long as I could. I threw my back out for the rest of the festival. I'm sitting there. I shouldn't have done that, but it was a good double high C. I have to say, one of my best. And he had a mic, which meant he just laid back and leaned into the mic, and he got a double C and held it about 2 or 3 seconds longer than mine after the cutoff. He just held it just to spite me, I think. And he got done, and he said, gotcha or something. And so that's the relationship we developed throughout that festival. But the interesting thing is on the gig, when I hit this double C, my thought was, and again, it's a concept, was put the sound out, let it go out, and let the room resonate. Trying to make the whole room my resonance, my resonator, let's say. Well, David Baker was the conductor on this festival, and his wife Lyda was in the audience. And after we got done, she comes backstage, everybody's talking, what have you. And she comes up to me and goes, What did you do on that last note? I'm going, what do you mean, what did I do? And she said, it was like, I could hear everybody, but she said, it sounded like the entire room was just resonating your sound. I mean, she quoted I never told anybody that before, but I was thinking that. I didn't even know if it was possible. I still don't. But apparently, you can achieve that to some extent. To some extent, it is possible. Exactly how I pulled it off, I can't really tell you. But I do know this: resonance, when you trigger it, or once you can stimulate resonance to happen, even if it's just in the inside of your trumpet, it can help you, to a level that's almost hard to believe. There's probably, I don't do that. I'm not a perfect player. I don't do that often. And the few times that I've really done it well have been almost an accident, but I know it's possible. And I still think that it's a worthy goal. And the closer you can get to doing that consistently, it's just going to help you, almost like nothing else that I've ever done. The more I've worked with intonation and trying to stay in the slot and get the horn to resonate and do that heavy lifting, as my old teacher Jerry Franks would talk about, the better and easier I've been able to play.
So from a technical level, let's just talk about that. How do you practice playing, finding the slots, and that kind of a thing?
Well, if I was to look closer here, within arm's reach, I probably have 4 or 5 tuners. Because I don't trust my ear all the time, especially during this pandemic lockdown. Okay, so say you're a really motivated trumpet player and you're practicing 3-4 hours a day throughout this entire lockdown. You're not playing with other players, other musicians. You're not even playing with a synthesizer or anything that's very consistent in pitch. You may play with some play-along albums, but who knows the exact pitch of that play-along album. So what I do, I take something that's sort of intangible, and I make sure that I try and keep my ears at A440, because there's kind of a natural tendency with all instruments and singers alike, as you ascend into the upper register, you want to hear those notes a little sharp. It's like the tempered scale, basically. The higher you go, they tune them just a little sharper, because your ear just kind of likes that sound a little bit better. And as a trumpet player, as a lead player, as one of my old teachers used to say, Max Greer, was a teacher I studied with when I was in high school, and what a character. But he said it's better to play sharp than out of tune. And from a musical standpoint, I would have to kind of agree with that. But unfortunately, if you're doing studio work or playing in a mic, where it kind of wipes out a lot of your overtones and it's only really transmitting the fundamental, pitch becomes a lot more critical. And so when I practice, especially trying to stay efficient, I will again tune my trumpet to the tuner, and then try and play it in tune. I know that if I am manipulating the pitch, if my horn is not tuned properly, but I'm still playing in tune, after a little while, my chops are working so much harder. For instance, when I was on the road conducting, I was running sound, I was conducting, I was playing lead trumpet, I was doing, 10 jobs at once. And sometimes right before the show would start, something would happen that would take me over here for 5 minutes. And all of a sudden I had to be on the bandstand. Downbeat is in 15 seconds. Oh, crap. My horn is still in the case someplace. And, I'd grab it, throw a mouthpiece in, start. And those shows are so continuous, you really can't change anything until intermission, which is an hour and a half in. Well, intermission comes at this one show, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just going, geez, my chops feel just hammered. And I'm just sitting there thinking, what's going on? And I look down at my horn, my tuning side's still all the way in. I played an hour and a half. on a Circus, which was ridiculous, with the tuning slide all the way in. And I thought, was I that out of tune? No, I wasn't out of tune at all, because I'm playing in tune. My ears are telling me to play here, but because I had to play against and work against the natural the resonance of the trumpet, my chops had to work 3-4 times as much. I pulled it out. Second half is beautiful. I was like, everything relaxed, everything was back to normal. I felt good. At the end of the show, at the end of 3 hours, I felt way better than I did after an hour and a half at intermission, because I realigned my chops. But when I practice, the main thing I'm doing, I'm trying to make sure my ears are tuned to A440, and I'll use a tuner. If I have one that you can hit a button that will play the pitch for you, that's a good way to get your ears involved. But with this pandemic, that's the one thing I've noticed, is when I have had an occasional rehearsal or gig throughout this whole period, I've had to work harder to be in tune with everybody around me, because I kind of lost that. I hadn't been doing that for a while. It's just been me in a room playing, so if it drifts, it drifts. And it's a little harder to tell. So I'll use a tuner a ton, and I try and keep the quality of sound the same. I like personally, and it might be because of lack of, as trumpet players, I think we probably have notched hearing after many years of playing. I'm sure that everybody loses a little bit of hearing. I like to play fairly close to a wall, so I get a good reflection back. In my house here, there's one room that is just obnoxious with being able to hear it, and that's my back bathroom that's up the stairs over here. It's about 3.5 feet wide by about 6 feet wide. It's got a toilet in there, it's got a sink, it's got a mirror, and it's got a window. Everything. And when I play in there, it's just loud as combined. So I don't have to play loud in there to hear myself. So I can relax and play, but I can hear any subtle adjustment here. I can hear just like that in there. So getting in a room that you can hear yourself very well, you're not blasting yourself out, hopefully, and take a tuner in there. And remember, like when I worked at the Bach factory, these things kind of dawn on me years later, but it's like they spent a lot of time designing these horns to play at A440 with the tuning slide out at a standard, whatever the standard amount is. But if you get that thing too far out or too far in, and you kind of know where the standard thing is, there's probably a little mark, tarnish or whatever on there, but it's usually about 1/2 inch roughly but if you stray too far from that, your horn is probably not in tune properly. And if I hammered my chops for 3 weeks on the road and came home, it's likely I'm going to be naturally playing a little sharp. So what do you do to compensate that? A lot of players would pull out the tuning slide, and now you're playing in tune, but you're still messing up your chops. One of the most interesting things I ever saw was I had an opportunity to play for Maynard's 75th birthday party, and we put together an alumni band. And the guy that organized it, Frank Varderos, he says, well, a lot of the guys that are alumni, let's just say they don't have the chops they used to when they were on the road. So would you like to come in and play some of the Maynard parts? It'll be a alumni and friends band. And I said, of course. So I showed up. Maynard's sound crew put his sound system up. And then on our concert, I did a lot of the Maynard stuff, and so I'm standing in Maynard's spot using his mic, using his sound system with his monitors cranked up like he has them, which is, let's just say, I've never heard monitors that loud before. The next night, Maynard and his band, his road band, played. During our concert, Maynard was at the table like 10 feet away from me, just looking at me while I'm trying to, play some of his stuff. Wasn't nerve-wracking at all. The next night when he's playing, a few of us got to sit at that table. So I'm sitting right under, almost under his belt. And he's 75. So let's just say he's probably not in his prime necessarily, but he was still totally amazing in so many ways. But at some tune he's playing, and he went up and hit this double high B, and it was painfully sharp. I mean, it was like, whoa, that was. I thought he's going to have to do something, but he's going to have to check his tuning or something. That was just like, it made my teeth vibrate or something. It was just horribly sharp. After that note, Maynard, is basically Maynard, and at some point he looked at his tuning slide, and it was out, half inch, whatever, kind of normal position, and he played this double B that was so sharp. And I thought he's going to have to pull out a little bit. He's got to. And he just grabs his tuning slide and just slams it all the way in. And I'm thinking, oh crap, this could be very interesting. He comes in and finishes the tune, and he was perfectly in tune. I had no way of explaining that. I'm sitting there going, other than, well, I guess that's just, he's Maynard. I guess that's the explanation there. I don't know. So great players can do kind of amazing things with no real good way of explaining what they do sometimes. But for mere mortals like myself, I find that if I can get the horn in tune, so it wants to resonate the pitch that I'm playing with, whatever the pitch of the ensemble that you're in is, and then you play in tune to that. And you can tell when you're in that slot, because it, like when you're in the shower, and you have the shower effect, your best sound will be right in the middle of that pitch. And that's where it's going to be the easiest to play, when you're in tune with where you've tuned your instrument. So that's, I don't know. Again, I apologize for going on and on. This stuff is I'm very passionate about this kind of stuff. And I have always kind of looked at myself as I play the trumpet and all this stuff, but I've always kind of had a teacher's heart in this whole thing. So I hate to give half answers, that can't be. Well, I used to have two kinds of lessons when I was on the road. It's like, one lesson was, I'm never going to see this guy again. What can I tell him that's not going to, screw him up in 6 months, and the other one, okay, I'm going to see you on occasion from, for a few years or what have you. There's kind of a different approach you can take. So I want there to be enough information out there to where you can actually understand it a little bit and hopefully apply some of these principles. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where my books started out, the rationale behind writing those books. So anyway.
Well, let's talk about a subject that's popped up. Lots of questions about this, and during this time where we've been through COVID, we're still experiencing this COVID pandemic, and a lot of people. There's been two camps, that we've noticed. There's people that have, because they have had no gigs, they haven't been motivated to practice, and there's other people. This is the camp I fall into. I felt like, wow, I got time. I can finally practice, so I'm pulling out all my books and working on new things. And I feel like I've made some great strides in my playing in certain areas, for myself. And it's been rather nice. But what has your practice situation, your routine or whatever, has it changed during this time? What have you done? How has it affected you? And what have you been doing to kind of keep your playing in shape?
Well, there's the politically correct answers I could give you, or there's the truth.
We need the truth.
Well, I'm trying to figure. Hold on here. I'm trying to figure out the best way I can say that without being self-incriminating too much. Let's just say I've always been a practitioner of good practice is better than, no practice is better than bad practice, let's just say. So if I'm not in a good mood, let's say, or if I'm not in the right mood to practice, or I'm thinking about something else, I'm not focused very well today, or, I've got something on my mind, I may decide just not to practice. I find that when I practice incorrectly, I set myself back farther than if I didn't practice. Like if I just start developing some bad habits, usually bad habits for me and most people I know, whether they'll admit to this or not, a bad habit takes usually 2 to 3 times as long to get rid of as it did to create. So I've always been somebody that if I didn't feel I was in the right headspace to do good work in the practice room, I'd rather take time off. And that could be anywhere from, one day a week, I'm just not going to practice, and it's not that I schedule it, but it's just about average of 1 day a week. I'm not up to it, or I got other things I got to do. And so it's, I just don't practice. Or it could be a month. If I just, and I'll be very honest, and I have a feeling I'm not alone. I may be one of the few people that will actually tell you this. But I think throughout this lockdown for the last couple of years, there's a certain amount of I don't know, depression or something, maybe not clinical depression, but you're just kind of bummed out by the whole situation, and there's not a lot of motivation. If I don't care if I'm playing at the White House with a great group or I'm playing in my basement with a couple local high school kids, I enjoy it about the same. And I'll try to play as well at both situations. But, during this lockdown, it's not only isn't it really easily possible to have playing experiences to just keep your mind fresh in playing, but people get, some people find out that, oh, you had people over to your house and you made music. Well, that's terrible. I can't believe you. They'll kind of read you the riot act. So there's this kind of vibe. It's not just the facts of what's happening, but it's the vibe that has sort of gotten up to where no matter what you do, if you're not doing everything the way the CDC or whatever wants you to do it exactly, you get criticized and stuff. So after a while, you just kind of say, "Oh, the hell with it! I'm not gonna go there." Really. Now, saying that, I have tried to keep my face together to a certain extent over this, but I'll have time. I've had times where I'll practice, really well for a couple of weeks, and then for no reason I can fully explain other than we're going through this thing, then I'll have a couple of weeks where I don't touch the horn, and I'll literally have to remember, where did I put that thing? Where, and, so I don't think I'm alone with that. I think there's a lot of people who have gone through similar kind of situations. I'm not proud of that.
We've heard that. We've heard that from a number of people, and I think it's totally normal. I think it depends. It varies from person to person. One thing I notice, and I've done this a couple of times in my professional life. The first time I did it, I swore I would never do it. I was a lot younger at the time, and I didn't have the understanding of the instrument that I have now. And I took a month off without touching it. I came back and I was like, wow, my range really hasn't fallen apart, and I can still play. But it felt like it took me 6 months to get my accuracy back, my tone back, and my endurance mostly. And now the last time I did this was a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago. It's coming up on 3 years. My wife and I did a big 30th anniversary thing, and we went to Oceania. We traveled around and did all this stuff for a month. And I took my horn anyways, but I didn't really play it. I played it maybe 15, 20 minutes
a few times.
A few times here and there. But it was kind of regular, but not much more than that. But what I feel like, and my point that I'm getting to, and it sounds like you also understand this, and I know Paul understands this because we've talked about it. Because Paul, you've had a move, you've had a bunch of things you've gone through, so you just didn't have time to play, for days on end or a week or whatever. And now that you understand the instrument, it's a lot easier to come back to it than it was before you had these concepts, before you understand your mechanics and what it felt like. Would you agree?
I would totally agree with that. In fact, that's one of the things that I've said this to myself and students, and for years, I had the misfortune of studying with great teachers. And what I mean by that, I tongue in cheek a little bit, was like, especially my two main teachers and mentors sort of, or Bill Adam and Jerry Franks. And sort of a problem that I experienced was they got me to the point where I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I really feel that I got to know this beast of how to play the trumpet strangely well, so well, in fact, that I know, like, for instance, if I have, when I was with the Smithsonian, it wasn't a full-time job, but we'd have a couple weeks a month that we'd be out there and stuff, and they would give us the program kind of maybe a month or two in advance, depending on how good the librarians were at getting things out. But we did what they call, it was a repertory band, and what we did, we replicated famous recordings or concerts done by great big bands. And shortly before they formed the orchestra, the Duke Ellington estate gave the Smithsonian like 500,000 pages of music. It was just like loose in a boxes and boxes, and they tried to actually put it back together and figure it out. And so we would get the music and whatever, but they would tell us what the program is. The problem is when you play, we ended up doing a lot of Duke Ellington concerts because we had all this music. And interesting thing, when you do a lot of Duke Ellington specific concerts, you end up, as a trumpet player, a lead trumpet player, you end up doing a lot of Cat Anderson solos, and maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But the one thing that, unfortunately for me, I became diabetic while I was on that gig. So there's a lot of time in there where I was not feeling great. But they would give me, a couple weeks notice when we're playing. When I would have to do a Cat Anderson thing, my problem was I knew how long it would take me to get that together. Like, I'm going to have to spend about 3 weeks kind of specializing on that to get that together. Well, if I had 6 weeks to go to the concert, many times I wouldn't touch the horn for 3 weeks because I don't need 3 weeks. I only need 3 weeks. So 3 weeks out, I would start. And I've always thought to myself, I wonder how much better I would play if I wouldn't just keep taking off these times, because I know myself, I know what I need to do, so I could take time off because I know I don't need to start practicing that until about here. So I might go fishing for that first 3 weeks. I don't know. But yeah, that can, once you understand it better at a high level, or get more, even just more in tune with how you play the trumpet, and how much preparation are you going to need for certain things. You can take time off without huge problems. The problem is, if you're a lazy trumpet player like I am, I want to play, great, but I don't, I've always been kind of a lazy practicer. So when I started practicing and learning how to do this, that's why I came up with the Maximizing Practice series. How do I make sure that when I'm in there, I'm really maximizing the time? Because I don't want to put in 4 hours a day. I got things I want to do, So how can I get it done well say in 2 or 3 hours, and that's when I was really practicing, I'd say at the height of my practice years. That's kind of what I'd go through. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The more better you get at really teaching yourself the trumpet, managing your trumpet playing and knowing how your body's going to react to certain things, you can get away with, being a little bit less of a practicer, less serious, or you can work a little less maybe.
Well, that brings me to a question, actually, Mark. You were saying that you take a few weeks, or you did, during that time, take a few weeks off. For all of us watching out here, do you have some off-horn exercises that you would do during that non-practicing time to sort of, keep your strength up?
Not really. And I'll tell you something. I don't know this, and I've thought about this a lot. I've gone, and we all go through our own careers as trumpet players, even if it's just you're in high school and, your career is, okay, I got to do marching band after school and I got a jazz band rehearsal here. And, that's what you're doing. But my career for many years was, it's like the story I tell is I was born with a hernia. And when I was 2 years old, they decided it was time to get me in there and have that thing surgically fixed. They had me knocked out at 2 years old on a surgery table, and when I was knocked out and anesthetized or whatever, the doctors just kind of went down there and started manually manipulating stuff around that I probably, let's just say, I can't imagine that would have felt good if I wasn't knocked out. But they were able to get things back in the right place before they had to cut me. So they put me in a truss for a couple of years and let me just grow sort of into whatever. And I never had another hernia. But hernias are somewhat, if you're men are generally weak in the groin area to begin with, but if you are born with a hernia, that probably, makes you a little bit more prone to be weak down there. And then what do I decide to do? I decided to play the trumpet for a living, and I'm going to be a lead trumpet player. Oh, and then I'm going to play gigs that are like 9-hour days, 5 days a week for like decades. It's like I've done almost everything I could do to have issues. So I haven't, strangely enough. But there's, now for some reason I've just forgotten what your question was.
Oh, it was off-horn practice, like during the times that you haven't been playing.
I do have some things that I do now and again that are off the horn, and I primarily got into that not to substitute for practicing really, but it's like back in the day, if I needed to get some work done and I just didn't get it done, and all of a sudden now it's midnight and everybody's asleep in the house, the last thing they want me to do is start playing the trumpet. So I would figure out things I could do for finger exercises, some isometric things, for strength in that. But for instance, I know what I was trying to get at. But when your career ends up being 9-hour days for a long time, you get so muscle bound in here without even trying that if you take off 3 months, 6 months even, you're still so muscle bound. You're still way ahead of the curve in terms of just having strength over a lot of players. So I've taken off a strange amount of time sometimes, and never, it's like an Olympic athlete, I suppose. If you're doing sort of, if you're a weightlifter, power lifter or something, you can stop doing that for 20 years and you'll still be able to, do twice as much as your next door neighbor, because I think it conditions your body, your mind, everything, just what your habits are. So because of that, I got away with not having to do a lot of that stuff because my gigs and my career kind of built this up to a level. It afforded me, I could be lazy without huge payment, huge problems. and that's hard. That's why I'm hesitant to try and describe that, is because I had a student once, and he came to me and he says, at the end of the school year, and he says, I'm not going to practice all summer. Okay. And I said, well, where'd that brilliant idea come from? And he says, well, Adolf Herseth doesn't practice. He takes 3 months off every summer. He puts, and I sat there for a couple seconds and I just realized, here's it. I said, but you're no Adolf Herseth, and great players, or players that develop a skill to a high level, like I was saying earlier, they can get away with things that are somewhat unexplainable, in a lot of ways. But, if you look at it, Adolf Herseth, when he was in his 50s and 60s, had so much, so many decades of having it together that he could take 3 months off and get away with it. You and I, okay, maybe not so much,
No, that's a point well taken. I mean, there's a lot of anomalies. There's a lot of different things that people do in their careers, but yeah, I get it. So, Mark, I know we got to wrap it up here, and it's just been a fascinating time talking to you and learning more about you and your concepts. And I just want to encourage people to check out your books, Maximizing Practice, Volumes 1 and 2, and Zen and the Art of Trumpet Playing, available at Amazon. Mark's a great guy, wonderful players. If you get a chance, you can check out his trumpet player online, and check him out on Facebook, everywhere else, and find out what he's up to. And I know he's got some great stuff up on YouTube as well. So, Mark, for both of us, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it, and we're glad you're in the group chiming in.
Well, it's, I try to promote as many trumpet sites, especially good ones like what you've got going, as possible. And I almost feel like sometimes I'm the grandfather of some of this stuff because we got started so early. But there's a lot of competition with a lot of groups. I'm just the opposite. I'm so thrilled that there's so many trumpet players out there communicating on the internet. And I'll have to say this in closing. My main thing has, because I feel really blessed that I've had some of the opportunities I've had to study with certain teachers and certain performance opportunities, that one thing that I have learned, and I 1000% believe this, that anybody can play the trumpet well. They can do anything they want to on the trumpet. They say, oh, well, Maynard is Maynard. Nobody can play like that in the upper register. I disagree. So the thing that I always trying to promote is that everybody don't look at this like it's an impossibility. It's the information is out there. One of the problems I found is great teachers many times don't write it down. They die and they go away, and then the next generation has the responsibility of trying to come up with this stuff again on their own. So talk to people, communicate. These kind of groups are invaluable for that. Everything you see on the groups, don't believe it. A lot of it's going to be nonsense. But listen to it. Engage your brain a little bit. Think about it. And if you can figure out 10% of what somebody says that might be beneficial to you, use that 10%. But it's not impossible. And I have to say, I've been playing a long time. You guys have been playing a long time, and it's still exciting. So it's one of those things that, it's a lifelong pursuit and ambition. And, I wish everybody success in that,
Great. Well, thank you so much again for being here with us.
Well, it was great hanging, and I'm sure we'll do this again at some point.
Sounds
absolutely.
Got it done the first
Mark.
time.
Okay.
Well, terrific.